Okay, so have you ever just stopped and thought about how many ancient cultures tell these really similar stories about the really distant past? It's kind of wild, right? I mean, you've got civilizations that were separated by huge distances. They never even met each other, and yet they all have these echoes of a massive flood or tales of beings that are part God, part human, or just totally bizarre.
Right. And for those of us who are kind of always trying to figure things out quickly, it's like we've stumbled onto a real gold mine here. The source material we're diving into today is all about those shared threads. It's about this human obsession with ancient mysteries and how we're all wired to look for patterns and connections in these stories from the past.
Yeah, it's kind of like how you can get hooked on a good mystery novel.
Yeah.
You just got to know what happened. So we're talking about some pretty heavy hitters here in terms of source material, right?
Oh, yeah. We've got interpretations of the Bible, but it also goes into some less well-known stuff like the Book of Enoch, which is this ancient Jewish text that's way more detailed about angels and giants and all sorts of the wild stuff. Plus, it's really cool because it doesn't shy away from taking a critical look at those concepts and how they measure up against all the modern claims we hear,
Hmm.
especially from all that channeling stuff that's going around these days.
So are we saying that there are some pretty big differences between what the Bible says and what some of those other ancient texts say?
Definitely. One of the things that really jumped out at me was how the Bible is actually pretty brief when it comes to describing the pre-flood world. It's mainly focused on Adam and Eve and that whole thing with the tree of life and the tree of knowledge.
Yeah, right. And the whole idea of free will and choosing good over evil, it's all super relevant, It's like the foundation of so much of our moral and religious thinking, even today.
Totally. But then you get the Book of Enoch and it's boom! Suddenly we're in this world where angels are hanging out with humans, having kids, creating giants, and it's whoa, wait a minute, how does this all fit together? That's what we're going to try to figure out, right? Where do these myths come from? And more importantly, can we even tell what's true anymore?
Okay, so let's jump in. Where should we start?
Well, how about we start with that point about ancient civilizations and these shared stories they all seem to tell? The source material makes it clear we got to pay attention to this. It's not just some random coincidence, right? I mean, the flood myth, for example.
Right, the flood. I remember reading about that in so many different cultures when I was a kid. It was okay, there's a flood in the Bible, but then there's one in ancient Mesopotamia, and then there's one in China. And I'm just what is going on here?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just the flood, right? You've got these stories of arcs popping up all over the place, these vessels of salvation, saving people and animals from destruction. It's almost like a universal archetype or something. It makes you wonder, was there really some kind of global catastrophe that all these cultures are remembering in their own way? It's just super intriguing.
Totally. And then there are those beings, right? Half human, half God figures. I mean, you mentioned giants already, but the source also mentions this ancient Chinese book, The Classic of Mountains and Seas.
Oh yeah, the Shanhai Jing. That one's a total trip, filled with descriptions of all these crazy creatures in these faraway lands.
Seriously strange stuff. And the source is hey, maybe we shouldn't just write this off as pure fantasy, right?
Yeah, maybe we should consider that maybe, just maybe, these stories are reflections of a really, really ancient reality where these unusual beings actually walk the earth alongside us, and that's whoa, that's a completely different way of looking at those ancient texts, right?
It is. It's not just a fairy tale. It's almost like a distorted window into a lost world.
Totally. Okay, so how about we dive into those biblical accounts versus the Book of Enoch a little deeper?
Yeah.
You're talking about how brief the Bible is about the pre-flood world, right?
Yeah, it just gives us the highlights,
Yeah.
Adam and Eve, the garden, the forbidden fruit, bam, they mess up, and then it's on to the next thing. But then you've got the Book of Enoch, and it's hold on.
Yay.
There's a whole lot more to this story.
Right, and it's not just that there's more, it's it's totally different. The Book of Enoch goes deep into the interactions between angels and humans, and then their offspring, the giants. It's way more I don't know, fantastical, even a little bit sci-fi, it's a whole other level of detail that you just don't get in the Bible.
Yeah, it's the Bible's giving you the SparkNotes version, and the Book of Enoch is the full, uncut director's commentary. So speaking of giants, the source talks about this memory from childhood, a book about dinosaurs. But it wasn't just about dinosaurs, it was about dino people. Like what? I mean, it sounds crazy, right?
Yeah, dino people, like large humanoids hanging out with dinosaurs. Now, to our modern minds, that seems like, okay, a little too out there. But the source uses this as a way to lead into the discussion of giants in general, you know? It's like saying, hey, this idea of large, powerful humanoids has been around for a long time. It's not new. It's not just limited to this one weird childhood
Yeah,
book.
like embedded in the stories we tell ourselves about the past, right?
Right. And the source points out that you find giants in different cultures, but especially within Jewish tradition. There are a lot of accounts of these beings, even if modern people have a hard time believing in them literally.
That's like they might not be taking it literally anymore. Those stories still exist, right? They're still being passed down.
Exactly. And the source mentions these discoveries of giant bones that have been supposedly found around the world. Plus, if you think about the Bible, remember the story of the Israelites conquering Canaan? It mentions giants living there. So that suggests that, according to these traditions, giants weren't just a pre-flood thing, they were still around afterwards.
So the stories are like persistent, right? They keep popping up.
Yeah, it's like they're hard to shake off, and then you've got this modern twist, right?
Yeah, all those videos you see on TikTok, like blurry footage of something big lurking in the woods, and everyone's like, Bigfoot! Or the Loch Ness Monster. Is this real? I mean, come on, right?
Right. And it's so hard to tell what's real anymore with all the deep fakes and AI technology that can make anything look believable. It's like our fascination with the extraordinary is colliding with this age of misinformation. But the source brings up a good point.
We gotta be skeptical. Question everything, especially when it comes to these kinds of claims.
So why do we even bother digging into these details? Why not just stick with the basic biblical narrative? What's the point? Well, that's exactly what the source tackles, right? The argument is that if we really want to understand the scriptures and the pre-flood world, we got to go beyond those basic accounts. We got to look at the oral traditions, those less well-known texts like the Book of Enoch. It's like piecing together a puzzle, you know? You need all those little pieces to see the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's like a 3D puzzle. But then there's that whole channeling thing. The source seems pretty wary of that, right?
Yeah, super wary. You know all that information about Atlantis and Lemuria that's supposedly channeled from like ancient spirits? The source is basically like, whoa, hold on a minute. That stuff is so all over the place and often contradictory. It's hard to know what to believe. And it makes the point that, you know, it can actually undermine faith in the Bible. If you start believing everything you hear from these channeled sources, you're going to end up with a pretty messed up understanding of things.
Yeah, it's almost like it's too easy to make stuff up and then just say, oh, I channeled this from some ancient spirit. So this brings us to that whole issue of memory, right? I mean, the source is really pushing this idea that getting accurate historical information is hard, especially if you weren't actually there yourself. I mean, duh, right?
Yeah.
But it seems like people forget that all the time.
Totally. And it's not just about being there, it's about how our memories work. Like, human memory is not some perfect recording device. It's super unreliable. Our memories can change. They can be influenced by our feelings, our beliefs, even trauma. So even if someone claims to be like remembering a past life or something, how do we know it's accurate? It's just something to be super aware of.
Yeah, like I always say, trust but verify. So the source seems to trust those ancient sages a lot more than these modern channelers, right?
Right, and it's like saying, hey, these ancient sages were like super committed to truth and passing down accurate knowledge. Whereas these modern figures, sometimes you just don't know their motives. Are they in it for fame, money? Who knows?
So let's talk about Jewish oral tradition, specifically Kabbalah. It's like a whole other layer to this, right?
Totally. Kabbalah is full of these amazing insights and interpretations of the scriptures. And it's where we find those details about God creating those colossal creatures that you don't really see in the Bible directly. It just adds this whole other level of awe and wonder to the creation story.
Yeah, and there's that cool parallel the source draws to the rock, the tick in Swansea's, right?
Oh, yeah. Like this massive mythical bird that's so huge it can block out the sun when it flies. It's like a metaphor for these immense beings that are just beyond our comprehension. And it's interesting how these kinds of creatures pop up in different cultures. It makes you wonder if there's some kind of like shared human fascination with the vast and the powerful, you know? Or maybe even a collective memory of a time when these creatures roamed the earth. Who knows?
It's like those stories tap into something primal, right? This fear and awe of the unknown. So what are those gigantic creatures in Kabbalah? What are their names again?
Okay, so you've got Behemoth, which is like this massive land creature.
Yeah.
Then you've got Leviathan, who rules the sea. And then there's this giant bird called Ziz. And get this, there's a tradition that God actually had to kill the female Leviathan to prevent them from like overpopulating and destroying
Right,
everything.
seriously. Like,
Yeah.
even God had to step in to be like, okay, too many giant sea monsters. That's just crazy. It makes you think about how immense and powerful these beings must have been in those ancient traditions.
Right. And those stories aren't just like random, they're meant to teach us something. Like, remember when God is questioning Job in the Bible? He's like, hey, look at Behemoth and Leviathan. Look how amazing and powerful I am.
It's like God is using them to show off, right? Like, look what I can create.
Yeah. And the cool thing is that the oral tradition doesn't stop there. It elaborates on the whole 6 days of creation thing, adding all these unusual creatures and this idea that the oceans are teeming with even more diverse life than what's on land. And get this, there are even stories of mermaid-like beings, half human, half fish. It's like, hello, the little mermaid, but way, way older.
It's like ancient people were already obsessed with mermaids.
Oh.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those other ancient myths and divine beings. The source specifically brings up the phoenix, right?
Yeah, the phoenix is a huge symbol in so many cultures. It's like this bird associated with the sun, kind of like the Chinese vermilion bird or zook.
Yeah, I remember reading about that one. And then there's that Confucius quote about how if the phoenix doesn't appear, it means the Tao is declining.
Right, it's like the phoenix represents this like cosmic harmony, and when it's gone, things are out of whack.
Things are not going well. Okay, so what's the deal with the phoenix in these traditions?
Well, it's seen as like this super special being that exists in another dimension. It's like the king of all birds. And there's this story about how it refused to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge after Adam and Eve messed up. And because of that, it got the gift of immortality and the ability to like be reborn from its own ashes every 1,000 years. It's like a symbol of renewal and overcoming even the worst kinds of destruction.
Like ultimate second chances, right?
Yeah.
So was there a phoenix in the Garden of Eden?
I mean, who knows? But there is a tradition about Enoch encountering a phoenix during his ascension. And this phoenix is described really differently from how we usually think of it. It's like this crazy mix of creatures. It's got a crocodile head, a lion-like body, tons of wings, and it's all radiant and rainbow colored. It's like, what even is that?
Sounds kind of terrifying, honestly. Not exactly the majestic bird I was picturing.
Right. But that just goes to show you how these oral traditions can take a familiar myth and just turn it on its head,
Right.
They give you a completely different perspective. Okay, so moving on. The source also talks about how heaven is described differently in the Book of Enoch compared to like those more peaceful images we usually see. It's depicted as this like awe-inspiring place, but with these contrasting elements like ice and fire together, lightning, thunder. It's like not exactly a peaceful, harp-playing kind of heaven,
Yeah, more like hardcore heavy metal heaven. What's up with that?
Well, it's highlighting the idea that these ancient texts had all sorts of different ways of understanding the divine, right? And in the Book of Enoch, the focus is on the power and majesty of God, like the raw energy of creation.
Okay, that makes sense. There's also this whole thing about the light that was created on the first day, right?
Yeah, and the source is like, hey, this isn't just sunlight because the sun wasn't created until day 4. It's talking about a different kind of light, a spiritual light that existed before the physical world as we know it even came into being.
It's like, whoa, mind blown. What happened to that light?
Well, the tradition says that it was hidden, like tucked away for some reason. And get this, remember how God looked at everything he created and said, it is good? Well, that doesn't happen on the second day.
Really? It's like God's giving us a hint, right? Something's different here.
Yeah.
What was created on the second day?
Well, according to tradition, that's when hell and the angels were created. So it kind of makes you think, right? It's like maybe there was some inherent potential for conflict even from the very beginning.
Oh yeah, that's deep. Okay, then there's the moon, right? Always gotta love a good moon story.
Oh, yeah? So the moon story in these traditions is basically like this. The moon got all jealous and wanted to be greater than the sun, which, bad idea, right? And so, as punishment, God made the moon dimmer and smaller. It's like a lesson about humility and the importance of, like, knowing your place.
It's like a cosmic reality check. Don't mess with the sun moon. And the source emphasizes this really cool idea that, like, everything in creation has a spirit. Like, even rocks and trees have some kind of consciousness. Is that what it's saying?
It's basically saying that creation is like this giant interconnected web of life, Everything is connected to the divine source and everything has its own unique spirit or life force.
Okay, that's just beautiful. Like, we're all part of one big, amazing family. Let's talk about the Garden of Eden and that whole pre-fall harmony thing. I read that all the animals could talk to humans back then. Can you imagine?
Right. I mean, what would it have been like to have a conversation with a lion or a bird? That's the kind of world that existed before the fall. But then sin entered the picture, and boom, everything changed. Animals lost the ability to talk. They started preying on each other, and it's like, oh man, things just got real.
Yeah, no more chit-chatting with the wildlife.
Yeah.
So why did that happen? Why did everything change?
Well, the loss of interspecies communication, it's like a symbol of that broken harmony, right? That separation between humans and the rest of creation that happened because of sin. It's like when we turned away from God, we also turned away from each other and from the natural world. And the source points out that this was a major shift, like a huge change in the natural order.
So like everything was connected and then boom, disconnect.
Exactly. And you see that reflected in the story of Balaam's donkey, right?
Yeah, that's the one story in the Bible where an animal talks after the fall, right?
Right. It's like this one weird exception that proves the rule. Suddenly, it's this big deal that a donkey can talk. It highlights how unusual and even miraculous it became for humans to communicate with animals after that initial harmony was broken.
So are we saying that like the animals were better off before the fall? Like they didn't have to worry about being eaten by each other?
Well, the source describes it as creation being like subservient to Adam and Eve in a way, but not in a bad way, you know? It was more like they had this reverence for humans because of the glory of God that was upon them.
Yeah, they recognized that humans were like the top dogs, right?
Yeah, they were like created in the image of God. But after the fall, that reverence was lost, and some animals even turned against humans, especially those who were wicked. It's like even nature itself was like, we're not going to put up with your crap anymore.
Okay, that's intense, and I can't believe we're just glossing over this, but the source mentions that Adam had a first wife.
Yeah.
Like before Eve.
Right. It's like, wait a minute, there's a whole other chapter to the Adam and Eve story that we never even heard about.
Okay.
It's one of those details that just makes you go, there's more to this than meets the eye. And the source also brings up some other unusual stuff about Cain, but doesn't really go into detail, which is kind of frustrating. Like, tell me more.
Okay, so let's dive into that Cain and Abel story a little more. What's the source's take on that?
Well, it basically says that there's more to it than just Cain being jealous of Abel's offering being accepted, right? Like, tradition says that Abel was born with two sisters and they became his wives.
What? So, like, sibling marriage was a thing back then?
Yeah, it's like totally different rules. The source explains that close kin marriage was allowed because in the beginning, the human gene pool was like totally pure.
Yeah, no genetic mutations or anything like that.
Right. But Cain, he was born with only one sister. So can you imagine? He's watching his brother with two wives, and he's probably thinking, this isn't fair. And that, according to tradition, was part of the reason he got so angry and jealous.
Like seriously ancient family drama.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's move on to the star of the show, or maybe the villain, the serpent. The source makes it clear. This was no ordinary snake we're talking about.
All right, like forget everything you think you know about snakes. The serpent was totally different, super intelligent, possibly even had like a human-like form and wings. It was more like a magnificent, angelic being before the fall, like Lucifer himself.
Whoa, so are we saying the serpent was like Lucifer's best friend or something?
Not exactly, but the source does describe this like collusion, right? It's like Lucifer was the mastermind and the serpent was his tool. It's like, hey, serpent, go tempt those humans. And the reason the serpent could talk to Eve is because back then, all animals could talk to humans. That was just like normal.
Wow, that would make for some interesting conversations.
Yeah.
So was the serpent like evil from the start?
Well, according to this tradition, the serpent was actually like this amazing steward of Earth, you know, like it was supposed to help Adam and Eve take care of the garden. It had this high level of intelligence, almost like an advisor to them. But then Lucifer got all prideful and rebelled against God because he didn't want to bow down to Adam.
Why not? What was Lucifer's problem with Adam?
Well, Lucifer was created from fire and Adam was created from earth, right?
Yeah, right.
And Lucifer was all like, I'm better than this dirt person. I'm not bowing to him. So he decided to like mess everything up. And he saw the serpent as the perfect way to do it.
Talk about holding a grudge. Okay, so walk me through the fall. What exactly happened?
Okay, so Lucifer gets the serpent on board and the serpent goes to Eve and basically tricks her into eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge, right?
Classic story. But the source adds that Eve was afraid she'd be replaced if Adam didn't eat the fruit too.
Right. So it wasn't just about temptation. It was about fear and insecurity and all that human stuff. It's actually kind of relatable, you know? She's like, I messed up. I got to get Adam to do it too, or I'm doomed. And guess what? All the animals ate the fruit too, except for, you guessed it, the phoenix.
That phoenix always got to be special, right? Okay, so then God shows up and he's not happy. And he's like, you will surely die. But they don't die right away, right?
Yeah, and the source explains that this is where things get tricky. Like, what does die even mean in this context? Because Adam lived to be like 930. The interpretation here is that a day for God is like 1,000 years to us.
Whoa, like a whole different scale of time.
Exactly. So it's like they were gonna die within a day, but on God's timeline. And before the fall, Adam was perfect. You know, he had this incredible wisdom. He could even see the future.
Like a prophet.
Yeah. And there's this tradition that he could even see the soul of David, who was supposed to be a king, but whose life was super short at first. So Adam was like, you know what? I'm going to give David 70 years of my life so he can fulfill his destiny. That's how awesome Adam was.
Okay, that is just amazing. Such a selfless act. But then when God confronts them about the whole eating the fruit thing, they're like, well, it wasn't me. It was the serpent. It was the woman. Like, come on, guys, take some responsibility.
Right, classic blame shifting. And then they try to cover themselves up with fig leaves.
Yeah, the ultimate DIY fashion fail.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, the source points out that the other trees, being sentient, they refuse to be used.
Yeah, it was like even the plant world was judging them. The only tree they could use was the tree of knowledge, the one that got them into trouble in the first place.
It's like the irony. And then there's the whole thing about the vine. It used to bear multiple fruits, right?
Yeah, it was like this symbol of abundance. But after the fall, bam, cursed. Only one measly fruit from then on.
Talk about a downgrade. So, okay, how do these stories get passed down through time?
Well, think about it. Adam lived for like 930 years. He would have known all about the pre-fall world firsthand.
Yeah, he was like a walking history book.
Exactly. So the source suggests that he passed down those memories and experiences to his descendants, and that's how those ancient myths and legends started to spread.
Like the original storyteller. And then he gets exiled from Eden. But it's not just like kicked out onto Earth.
No,
right?
no, it's way more complex than that. The source describes this journey through different realms, like 7 heavens and 7 earths.
Like, whoa, a multi-dimensional road trip. What was he doing in all those realms?
Well, according to tradition, he encountered all sorts of beings in those other realms. Like, some of them sound straight out of the classic of mountains and seas. Creatures with human bodies and animal heads or multiple limbs. And some of them even resemble Hindu deities. It's like mind-blowing.
Okay, that's getting into some serious ancient astronaut theory stuff. So are we saying there are like multiple worlds out there and we're just living on one of them?
That's the idea. It's like this ancient version of the multiverse.
Yeah.
And Cain gets exiled to a similar kind of desolate realm as punishment, but then he eventually repents. So there's hope even for Cain.
It's never too late to turn things around. What about that other world with Cain's descendants and those folks from Babel?
Right. So this world, it's described as like super harsh, not much water. But the people living there, they're like super advanced. They have this knowledge that seems to have survived from the pre-flood world. It's like a blend of hardship and ingenuity.
Yeah, like they had to use their brains to survive.
Yeah.
And speaking of advanced knowledge, the source talks about how we see signs of that in the ancient world, right? Like those megalithic structures, Machu Picchu, the pyramid.
Right. It's like, how do they do that?
Yeah. Those structures are still blowing our minds today. And the source brings up the theory that maybe they were using acoustics, like sound, to move those massive stones. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's like ancient sonic technology. And it's interesting because the source connects this advanced knowledge back to Cain's descendants. They were building cities, developing technologies, but they were also really into idolatry. So it's like a warning, right? Technological progress doesn't automatically equal spiritual progress. In fact, it can sometimes make things worse.
Yeah, it's like that saying, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So
Yeah.
let's get back to the serpent. What was its punishment again?
Oh, well, after the whole tempting Eve fiasco, the serpent gets a major downgrade, right? It loses its wings, its limbs, and basically becomes the crawling snake we know and, let's be honest, kind of hate today. And it becomes the symbol of like cursedness and ugliness. It's a reminder of that whole pride comes before a fall thing.
Yeah, don't get too big for your britches. And I remember reading that God made clothes for Adam and Eve out of the serpent's skin, right?
Yep. Like after the fig leaf fail, God's like, okay, I'm gonna give you some proper clothes. And it's pretty symbolic, right? Like using the skin of the very creature that caused their downfall to cover their nakedness. It's like a tangible reminder of the consequences of their actions. And get this, tradition says that those garments were passed down through generations, like to Seth, then to Noah, and eventually they were stolen.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah.
Like By whom?
Well, the story goes that Nimrod, the guy who built the Tower of Babel, he stole those garments. And it's like, those clothes gave him this crazy power and helped him like unify Earth and build that tower. It's wild.
It's like a cursed inheritance. Okay, so tell me about the Tower of Babel. What's the source's perspective on that?
Okay, so get this. The source is saying that the Tower of Babel wasn't this like skyscraper reaching for the clouds like we usually imagine. It was built in a valley. And they were using this like rediscovered pre-flood technology.
So they were pretty advanced, even after the flood, huh?
Right. And their goal wasn't necessarily to reach heaven, but to reach space. Like they were terrified of another flood and they figured, hey, if we can get high enough, we'll be safe.
Talk about an ambitious plan. So how did God respond to this?
Well, God was not having it, right? He's like, okay, enough of this nonsense. And so he confused their languages, which stopped them from building the tower. But he also like messed with their memories. He fragmented their collective memory.
Like a divine mind wipe. Why would he do that?
The source explains that it was to prevent them from like collaborating on evil stuff again. Like if they can't communicate, if their memories are all jumbled, they can't get together and cook up more trouble.
Makes sense. And that also explains why there are so many different ancient myths, but they still have those similar themes, right?
Exactly. It's like they all started with the same basic stories, but as they spread out and their languages and memories got messed up, the details changed and got reinterpreted. It's like this fascinating mix of unity and diversity in the human experience.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about Cain again. What's the deal with him?
Well, the source really emphasizes that Cain knew what he was doing when he killed Abel, right? It was like a deliberate, wicked act. And when he repented, it wasn't really sincere. He was more like, oh crap, I'm in trouble now.
Yeah, not exactly heartfelt remorse.
Right, and that mark that God put on Cain, it's described as a horn, and it was meant to protect him from animals who might want to take revenge, like, hey, don't mess with this guy, he's got my mark on him.
It's like divine protection.
Yeah.
So, did Adam ever figure out this whole repentance thing?
Well, yeah, he saw what happened with Cain, and he realized that even after doing something terrible, there was still a way back to God. Like, God still cared for Cain, even after what he did.
So it's never too late to try to make things right, huh? And the source clarifies that Cain's wife was Adam's daughter from his first marriage, right?
Yep, like, family trees were pretty tangled back then, limited options. And speaking of Cain's family, oral tradition gets into some interesting stuff about his lineage. Like, there's this guy, Lamech, who has 2 wives, but not for the usual reasons, right?
Yes.
Like, one wife is for having kids, and the other one is just for, well, pleasure, and he's even using contraception.
Whoa, ancient birth control. That's pretty scandalous for those times. And the source makes it clear that this is seen as like a sign of growing wickedness, like people are straying further and further from God's plan.
Exactly, it's like a downward spiral. And then you get the whole intermingling of Cain's descendants with fallen angels, which leads to the birth.
So let's talk about like the structure of it all, right?
Yeah.
Not just our one sky, one planet. These ancient legends lay out this whole kind of cosmic blueprint
Yeah.
with 7 heavens and 7 earths, like a multi-layered reality. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, the idea of the 7 heavens is really important in ancient thought. It represents completeness and perfection.
So it's not just about altitude, it's more like different spiritual levels.
Exactly. Each heaven has its own unique characteristics.
Okay, so like what about the 7th heaven? What's that like?
The 7th heaven, that's often called Erebot. And it's seen as this realm of pure goodness, beauty, the essence of life, peace, blessing, kind of like the ultimate source of everything good.
Sounds pretty nice.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate spiritual sanctuary. And it's also believed to be where the souls of the righteous go and the spirits of those who haven't been born yet, even the dew that brings people back to life.
Wow.
And at the very center of it all is the divine throne, with all these powerful celestial beings surrounding it.
So that's the 7th heaven, and then there's this whole other structure underneath with 7 earths.
Yeah, think of it like this. You've got the 7th heaven at the top, and then beneath that, you have these layers. Like starting from the very bottom, you have Erez.
Erez.
Right, and then going up, you have the abyss, and then you have the Tohu, which often represents chaos or like primordial emptiness. Then you have Buhu, which is more like just pure emptiness, and then a huge sea, and then even more water.
Wow, that's a lot of water.
It is. But after all that water, you finally reach the 6th earth.
The 6th earth, and that's called Adama.
Adama. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's definitely connected to Adam. It's the earth where God's presence is strongest, the ground where humanity first appeared.
Ah, so that's where it all began.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But it doesn't end there. Below Adama, you have another set of those elemental layers.
Yeah.
And then you reach the fifth earth,
The fifth earth.
which is Arka.
Arca. And that one...
Well, it's kind of the opposite of the seventh heaven. It's associated with Gehenna, the place of fiery judgment,
Yeah.
and other kind of dark places like the gates of death and the underworld,
Yeah.
where they say the souls of the wicked are kept.
So you've got ultimate good at the top and ultimate not so good at the bottom.
It's like a cosmic spectrum.
Exactly. But what about the earths in between? Ooh, good question. So below Arka is Haroba, which means the dry place, but it actually has brooks and streams. Then you have Yabasha, the mainland, which is more like what we'd expect with rivers and springs. But then things get really weird with the second earth.
The second earth?
Table.
Why is Table so strange?
Because it's the first of the mainlands that was inhabited by living creatures. But not creatures like we know.
Okay, what kind of creatures?
Imagine 365 different species on Table, all completely unique and totally different from anything on Earth.
365, that's a lot.
It is. And they're not just a little different, they're like completely otherworldly.
Give me some examples. Like, what kind of creatures are we talking about?
Picture this. Beings with human heads, but lion bodies, or serpent bodies, or ox bodies.
Yeah.
And then flip that. Imagine human bodies with lion heads, serpent heads, ox heads.
That's wild.
It's like a whole different kind of evolution happening over there.
So human-animal hybrids, basically.
Yeah, basically. But there's more. Table also had these human beings that were like double. They had 2 heads, 4 arms, 4 legs, everything duplicated except for one trunk connecting them.
So 2 minds in one body. I wonder if they ever disagreed.
Actually, they did. The legends say these double humans would fight over food and drink.
Ah, each head wanting the best stuff.
Exactly, like a built-in duality even within one being.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So with all these strange forms, were the inhabitants of Tebel seen as like monsters or something?
Not really. In fact, the legends say that these double-bodied humans were known for their piety.
Really?
Yeah. Even with their unusual bodies and internal conflicts, they were considered more devout than us.
So outward appearances don't always reflect what's inside.
That's a good point. It's a theme that comes up a lot in these stories.
Okay, so we've explored this whole multi-layered cosmos and met some truly bizarre life forms. Now let's zoom in on our own early world, the Garden of Eden,
Yeah.
and specifically the serpent. These legends paint a very different picture of the serpent than just a regular snake.
Oh, definitely. This serpent is described as this majestic, powerful being.
Like how?
Well, for starters, it stood upright on 2 legs.
Like a person.
Yeah, just like a human. And it was as tall as a camel.
Whoa, a talking upright camel-sized serpent. It's definitely not the image I had in mind.
It's a far cry from the typical snake in the grass.
Yeah, for sure. So what was this serpent's role in the garden?
It actually had the potential to be really helpful to humans. The legends say that if things hadn't gone wrong, a single pair of these serpents could have done all the work for humans.
Like farming and stuff.
Yeah, and they could even provide precious resources like silver, gold, gems, pearls.
So they were like living treasure chests.
You could say that. They were full of potential.
So what went wrong? What caused the downfall of this amazing creature?
Ironically, it was its own intelligence. The serpent's sharp mind led it to question God and become envious of humans,
Envious of humans. Why?
especially their relationships, their intimacy. Driven by this envy, the serpent decided to try to bring about Adam's downfall.
So it was all about jealousy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it chose to approach Eve, figuring she'd be easier to persuade.
And we all know how that turned out.
Yeah, that one encounter changed everything.
What about the other animals in the garden? What was their relationship with Adam and Eve like before the fall?
It was a state of pure harmony and understanding. All the animals were under Adam's dominion. They relied on him and Eve for everything. And get this, they could all understand human language.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, and they respected Adam and Eve because they saw the image of God in them.
So it was like a perfect paradise.
Pretty much, but all that changed after the fall.
So the consequences were felt throughout creation.
Yeah, it affected everything.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about another fascinating group from the pre-flood world. Giants.
Okay.
These massive beings. Where do they come from, these legends?
They're described as the offspring of fallen angels.
Fallen angels.
Yeah. These celestial beings who descended from heaven and had children with human women.
And those children were the giants.
Exactly. They were incredibly large and powerful.
That sounds straight out of a myth.
It does, doesn't it? But in these legends, it's presented as a real historical event.
So what was the impact of these giants on the world?
They're portrayed as a major source of corruption and violence in the pre-flood world.
They caused trouble.
Yeah, big time. Their actions led to suffering and moral decline. It got so bad that the legends say the blood spilled by the giants cried out to heaven.
And that got God's attention.
It did. The archangels brought accusations against the fallen angels and their giant offspring.
So what did God do?
He took decisive action. He sent Uriel to warn Noah about the flood and tell him to build the ark.
Okay.
He sent Raphael to bind Zazel in chains and cast him into a pit until Judgment Day.
Wow.
He sent Gabriel to stir up conflict and destruction among the giants.
So it was like a full-on divine intervention.
Yeah, God was putting things back in order.
Now, you mentioned earlier how the serpent tempting Eve might hint at the idea of multiple creations.
Yeah, remember how the serpent told Eve that God himself ate from the tree of knowledge before creating the world? And that he forbade humans from eating it so they wouldn't gain the same creative power.
So it wasn't just about knowing good and evil, it was about the power to create worlds.
That's one way to interpret it. It suggests that there might be other creations out there beyond our understanding.
God's other projects.
Maybe. It definitely opens up the possibilities.
It does. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other strange creatures and offspring mentioned in these legends,
Okay.
like the descendants of Cain. They're associated with some pretty unusual developments.
Yeah, Cain's lineage is often linked to a kind of decline in humanity's divine image.
What do you mean?
Well, the legends say that monstrous giants arose from Cain's line as a consequence of their sin.
So like a physical manifestation of their spiritual state.
Exactly. Some interpretations even suggest that these giants looked like ape men.
Ape-men giants. That's a wild thought. Could that tie into actual archaeological discoveries like Neanderthals maybe?
It's an interesting connection to make. Of course, we're dealing with legends here, not scientific evidence. But it's fascinating to think about how these ancient stories might intersect with our understanding of human evolution.
It definitely blurs the lines between myth and reality. Now, what about Cain himself? What happened to him after he killed Abel?
Some traditions say he was banished to another planet.
Another planet, like as punishment.
Exactly. It reinforces this idea of a vast cosmos with multiple inhabited worlds.
And it wasn't just Cain who got sent to another planet, right? Wasn't there something about that in the Tower of Babel story too?
Yep. The people who built the Tower of Babel were also scattered across the cosmos as a consequence of their pride.
So trying to reach heaven got them sent to other planets.
Ironically, yes. It shows that divine judgment could take many forms.
So we've got these specific examples of banishment to other planets, but then there's this recurring mention of the inhabitants of 7 Earths.
Right, those are the mysterious others dwelling on the other 6 Earths besides our own.
And we don't really know much about them.
The legends don't give us a complete picture, but if Table is anything to go by, we can imagine some pretty strange life forms out there.
Yeah, human-animal hybrids, double-bodied humans, who knows what else.
Exactly. It's a glimpse into a universe with far more biodiversity than we could ever imagine.
Truly mind-blowing. Now let's turn our attention to Esau and his descendants. There are some pretty peculiar stories about them as well.
Oh yeah, especially his grandson, Anak.
What's so special about Anak?
Well, the legends say he encountered creatures that were half human.
Half human?
Yeah, blurring the lines between species even further.
Wow. And what about Anak himself? What's his story?
He's got a pretty strange one. It's said he was born through incest.
Incest?
Yeah. And he's also credited with engaging in animal hybridization.
So he was creating even more bizarre creatures.
It's like he was pushing the boundaries of what was considered natural.
So it seems like the pre-flood world was a very different place than what we know.
Oh, absolutely. It was a world teeming with strange and powerful creatures, multiple realms, giants, fallen angels. It was a time of great wonder, but also great chaos.
And then the flood came and wiped it all away.
Yeah, it was a reset button. The world we know today is just a small part of what existed before.
It makes you wonder what else might be out there still.
Right. Maybe these legends are hinting at a universe far more vast and mysterious than we realize.
So to wrap up this deep dive, we've journeyed through a cosmos of 7 heavens and 7 earths. We've encountered a whole menagerie of incredible creatures, and we've glimpsed the possibility of creation happening on a scale we can barely fathom.
It's been quite a journey.
These ancient Jewish legends offer a truly unique perspective on the origins of everything, and they challenge us to expand our understanding of what's possible.
To imagine a universe filled with wonder and mystery.
Exactly. So as you go about your day, dear listener, I encourage you to think about these ancient stories. What did they tell us about the scope of creation, about the diversity of life, about the mysteries that still lie beyond our grasp.
And maybe even about our own place in this grand cosmic tapestry.
A lot to ponder.
It is, but that's what makes it so fascinating.
And that's why we love these deep dives.
Me too. Always something new to discover.
Thanks for joining us today.
Until next time.
Keep exploring.